Hi everybody, this is Josh Wagner and I am wondering about vulnerability. So there's tons of traffic today. As you can see, I'm barely moving. So I thought, what a great opportunity to shoot a podcast. I'm really grateful to everybody who has watched the podcast so far. I think cumulatively over the last 5 or 6 episodes, I've had about 5,000 to 6,000 views or listens, depending on the platform. And I'm just really grateful for all that. You can follow me at Wondering to Work, WONDER. I'm not doing Twitter. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook because Twitter's evil. I'm just saying. So it's just not, that's something I like to do. So I was thinking about, I just finished my course on healing from shame, and you might have seen it in some of my posts and things, but I filmed that about 3 weeks before today, and I did it. I did it 3 nights in a row. I filmed 4 nights. 3 of those nights were consecutive, and then the 4th one I had to take a break between nights 3 and 4. And the reason that is because the shame stuff is such a difficult thing to even talk about. I've had my own struggles with it. I know you probably have. And you know, there's a lot of different things that if you want to get, I'll do some podcasts on it too, in addition to the course that I have, because the course is actually going to be free if you need it to be free, and if you want to pay for it, you can. I like to make stuff available to people that, you know, can't otherwise afford it. But I'll also break it down a little bit into some podcast stuff. But I was thinking about what made it so hard, and I didn't really reveal too much of my own, you know, struggles with shame, although I've had them, and I've had covers for them. I've used humor, I've used a job, I've used a position, I've used a status and authority that I had. I used a uniform, several uniforms in my life. And all of that was to cover up the topic of the day, which is vulnerability. And I can't think of the guy. He's my friend on Facebook, and if I can remember him, I'll tag him. I was thinking about him this morning as I was walking the dog, who actually kind of introduced me to the idea of vulnerability. And there's a second place, and I'll link it into the description as well. It's a book called Clicked. And one of the things they talk about in that book, Clicked, is that people that are able to be vulnerable with each other will click faster. They'll have a more intimate, quicker relationship. And even people that only shared an intimate thing with like a group therapy session, for instance, for only an hour, but they were really truly intimate, really truly open with each other, ended up having like a lifetime relationship. So vulnerability is really hard. And there's two ways that I'd like to kind of look at vulnerability. One is being vulnerable with yourself, and the other is being vulnerable with other people. Now, again, I'm getting, this is kind of on my mind because the Healing from Shame course requires a lot of the first one, a lot of vulnerability with yourself. And I frankly think that the first person that you need to be vulnerable with, and let's define vulnerability, it's letting your guard down. It's being ridiculously honest. It's being straightforward. It's being, you know, open. It's allowing yourself to be hurt, potentially, you know. Why would you ever want to let yourself be hurt? I mean, that's crazy, but I'll get to that here in a second. But the first person that people have difficulty being vulnerable with is themselves. They build this facade around themselves. They build this like walled castle. And they do it. A lot of people have trouble with vulnerability because, well, they don't want people to see them for who they are. I like Jordan Peterson. I know there's a lot of people that don't like him, but I don't really care. That's fine. If you don't like him, that's cool. But one of the things he said is that being authentic and radically honest with yourself is the most difficult thing. And it's really easy to want to wall that off because in this, I think it's the second rule in the book of the 12 Rules of Life, he talks about the fact that we alone know how dark and deep down we can go, how wounded we are. And we don't want other people to see that. And so in order to keep it from other people, the first person we keep it from is ourselves. Because, like, what if the idea is, what if I'm bad? What if there's something wrong with me that makes me unlovable? What if I see this thing and it causes too much pain? You know, something that's happened or something that I'm feeling or something that I tend toward or have done in the past. What if people know me for who I am? And I have I have a terrible problem with that. There's a thing called imposter syndrome that goes alongside of this whole thing where, you know, people feel like imposters because, well, what if they really knew who I was? Well, it doesn't just start with other people, it starts with you. What if you really knew who you were? And that vulnerability of being authentic and honest with yourself is really difficult. And I can tell you that in my life, I've done all sorts of things to not be vulnerable. I've eaten, I've indulged in too much drinking, I've distracted myself with work, with projects. I still have a tendency to do that sometimes, where I've actually not been vulnerable with myself. But what the real key is, and again, I talk about this in my Healing from Shame course that's coming out here soon. But one of the things that I really talk about is the fact that when you are willing to be vulnerable with yourself, and open and honest with yourself, oftentimes it's less difficult to deal with than you imagine it to be, even if what you are dealing with is worse than you think it's going to be. So let me give you, for instance, someone that was abused as a kid, will put up all these walls and facades and things to protect themselves from themselves, because they don't want to face the horror of what happened to them as kids. And the real thing that they do is that they build up this facade around themselves so that they don't get hurt by themselves or other people. But when they begin to deal with that trauma that happened in their life, as they deal with it, sometimes the trauma, as the memories, sort of are clarified, is actually worse than they imagined that it was. But the act of dealing with it is never as bad as you think it's going to be. So it might be actually worse, the thing that happened, but actually dealing with it is not as bad as you think it's going to be. So there's a vulnerability there. The second way that we have to be vulnerable with or we want to use this idea of vulnerability is with other people. And this is something that I was thinking about again in my, I've been thinking about this for a couple days, but particularly in my walk with my doggo this morning, is that if you want to be loved and if you want to love, and as I've said over the years in my many different manifestations of being Josh Wagner, and I do believe this, that love is ultimately the thing that we ultimately want, to love and to be loved. There's a giant dog I just passed. It's really cool. Maybe you can pause this and see it because he's over here. But it's a huge dog. If you want to love and to be loved, which is what it comes down to, and that's, I believe, what the Human Project sometimes comes down to, although it's, I guess, whatever you want it to be, you have to risk getting hurt. The two are inherently connected with each other, because if you really want to love, if you really want to be intimate with someone, and I'm not just speaking physical intimacy, but that's one aspect of it, emotional intimacy, spiritual intimacy, personal intimacy, intellectual intimacy, you have to risk getting hurt. It goes hand in glove. You can't just be in love with somebody and not be vulnerable. Vulnerability and love are part of it. And another word we could probably use, it's not exactly a one-for-one, but it's a tangent, it's related as intimacy that I just used. But intimacy requires a vulnerability, or it requires an honesty with yourself and another person. It runs the risk of getting hurt. That's why people get into relationships all the time where it's not a real relationship, or they kind of feel lukewarm about somebody, because it's safe. I can't tell you how many people I know have gotten into absolutely safe, quote unquote, safe relationships because they don't want to get hurt. But at the end of the day, safety is not enough. At the end of the day, safety is, I don't want to say it's boring. It's not fulfilling. It's boring too, because we need that challenge. We need to have somebody to contend with. We need to have we need to have somebody who challenges us. We need to have somebody in our life who knows our vulnerabilities, who could actually hurt us, but chooses not to. Oh my gosh, that's why love is such a risk. It's why almost every song is about love songs, or breaking up. Like every other song is either about breaking up or love songs. Just listen to the radio sometime, right? In some way, shape, or form, or some level, that's what every song on the radio is about. Country songs, rap songs, pop songs, all those kind of things. It's either about breaking up or getting together, because what happens is that you throw caution to the wind when you do this, and you have to be vulnerable, and that's when people love each other. There's plenty of studies. I'll refer back to that book, Clicked, and there's plenty of studies like in there where people, that the way that people clicked was they were, for some way, shape, or form or reason, vulnerable with each other. And let's use our example of our best friends. Like my best friends, and I have a very tight circle of friends. I have a very tight circle of people who know everything about me, who I'm completely vulnerable with. And I'm not suggesting you have to be vulnerable with everybody, or completely, don't walk up to strangers and be like, you know what, I had this traumatic event happen to me when I was 12. And they're going to look at you like, because it actually requires them to be vulnerable to receive it. And there's a psychological need for reciprocity to be vulnerable right back to you. So that's another podcast. But there's a lot of studies that show that when people can be authentically vulnerable with each other, like my friends, that's what bonds us. And it's not just simply a thing like I know your secrets and you know mine, although there is some of that going on. It's an issue of intimacy and vulnerability, and sets all sorts of great chemicals off, and oxytocin and dopamine and norepinephrine and all those kind of things. That I have to take a different route to work because of the stupid traffic. So it's still slow, but think about the ways that you are vulnerable, or that you are not vulnerable, and start with yourself. Like, are there things that you need to be radically honest with about yourself? Are there facades that you put on that aren't helpful? Everybody has a public-facing face. I still do, even though my public-facing face is a lot more authentic than it used to be. But I still, I don't just air my dirty laundry on the podcast here, or go up to some stranger and say, "Guess what? I had this thing happen," and it's like, "Okay, TMI, buddy." That's right, TMI. I'm using it. I'm bringing it back. It's a thing. It's a thing that was good, and I think we should bring back TMI, because a lot of people frickin' tell you too much information, and they should know it, and you should have some way to tell them this. TMI. So bring it back. I'm going to start using it. TMI. But there is a point in which if you want to be intimate with somebody, if you want to have a loving relationship, you have to be vulnerable. You have to open yourself up to potentially getting hurt. And what real friendships are the people that can hurt you, but they choose not to. People that know you warts and all and choose not to use it against you. So anyway, wandering to work. As I'm wandering to work and taking 4th Street instead of 71, because for some reason 71's completely closed today, all the way up to like the north end of town. So you're going to see this probably tomorrow when it's all cleared up, but who knows what happened today. And who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. You just never know. But, I really appreciate you coming and stay tuned. I got a lot of great things in the hopper that's coming out. I got a couple courses like Healing from Shame, and I redid my 4 phrases course and made it more secularized. And I've got a workshop coming out on conflict resolution. I've got a couple new podcasts coming out after this one. So there's just a lot of great things. I'm in a very creative moment of my life. I love being in a creative moment. I wasn't, in many ways, I struggle with creativity because I was hemmed in some way, shape, and form. I couldn't say some of the things that I wanted to say or do some of the things I wanted to do. And that's not a criticism of my past life. I appreciated everything that I had while I was there. It was just time to move on, and been time to move on for a while. And I hope that sort of the opportunity for brand new avenues of creativity like this podcast are something that is helpful to people. Ultimately, I want to be helpful to people. I want to help people to live happy and good lives, and to trust that you can be vulnerable with yourself and with other people. You can find them and they won't hurt you. And that's when real intimacy and real love begin. So, wandering to work. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram, or just follow my personal page. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.